Where did Lent come from? What do we do when something important happens? We remember it. If it's something great, we celebrate. If it's something painful, we commemorate or observe it. Either way, we definitely don't ignore it. We throw a party or put a wreath on a grave, post on social media, something to indicate that we remember. In part 2 of our Lent series, we're looking at how Lent got started and how it's changed over time. After Jesus died and rose from the dead, the early church did what we would do. They decided to commemorate both the death and resurrection of Jesus, as both were foundations to their faith. Jesus' death is what freed us from the bondage of brokenness, but his resurrection is what freed us from the constraints of life and even death itself. Jesus proved that he was Lord over life and death, that death does not have the ultimate power and authority, he does. So, of course, the church wanted to celebrate it all. Just like us, though, their lives were busy, fraught with pain and suffering. They were often kicked out of where they lived because others couldn't stand what they stood for. Many were killed for their faith. And if not, they still might have a hard time earning a living. Even those who weren't struggling like that had to work every day in order to eat. They had very little discretionary time. It was easy to drift from day to day, distracted by what was in front of them. Though their circumstances weren't anything like ours, the reality of getting caught up in everyday life was pretty much the same. Because as much as our thinking and experience is so different after more than 2,000 years, our nature hasn't really changed that much at all. So what did they do? They took time before Easter, which was then called Pascha, to fast and pray. Some communities fasted for 40 hours, which is about how long Jesus lay in the tomb. Others fasted for up to 6 days. Each community kind of did it on their own. There was no standard practice, just a desire to take time away from the day-to-day and focus more on Jesus. As time progressed, some lengthened the time to 40 days. In case you don't know, the number 40 is symbolically important in the Bible. So many significant events lasted for 40 days or 40 years. The flood lasted for 40 days. Moses fasted and prayed on top of Mount Sinai while he waited for the 10 Commandments for 40 days. The people of Israel spent 40 years wandering the desert after being liberated from the Egyptians. Goliath taunted the people of Israel for 40 days before David killed him. Jesus fasted in the desert for 40 days between his baptism and starting his ministry. And he appeared to the disciples for 40 days after he rose from the dead. But even with all that symbolism that had gone before, it still wasn't consistent. It was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD that agreed upon a 40-day practice. They called it the Tessaracosta in Greek, or Quadragesima in Latin, which literally means 40th. It was set aside as a time of preparation for Good Friday and Easter. It included penance, prayer, and fasting. Pope Gregory, who's the one who created the Gregorian calendar, solidified the date somewhere in the 5th or 6th centuries, choosing 46 days before Easter to allow for 40 days of fasting and 6 Sabbaths. Fasting at that time was all day and was called the Black Fast. Christians only ate 1 meal a day, and it was after sunset, and certain foods weren't allowed. They also prayed specific prayers called the Office of None. Now, during the Middle Ages, this practice evolved into the Order of Penitence. If someone had committed what they called a grave sin, they were physically separated from the congregation at the start of Lent or Quadragesima. They were sprinkled with ashes and wore sackcloth. After 40 days of prayer, they were publicly reconciled with the rest of the group. By the 11th century, the church leaders realized that everyone needed repentance. They extended the ashes to everyone and still focused on prayer, penance, and fasting. And that's where Ash Wednesday comes from. By the 12th century, the name was changed to Lent, which was a shortened version of the Old English word lengthen, which means lengthening of days. Since then, the observance of Lent has evolved quite a bit, from fasting until sundown on every day but Sunday, to not eating certain foods during that time, to giving up sweets. Norman Tanner reminds us that though Lent does involve stripping away some of the pleasures of this world, it's not just to deprive ourselves of something, there's a so that. Like, we stop eating sugar so that we can focus on healthy food that will nourish, sustain, and even heal us. We stop drinking coffee so that we aren't so jittery at bedtime. We stop watching screens at least an hour before bedtime so that we enjoy deeper and more restful sleep. The same is true with Lent. Whatever we decide to give up during Lent, it's done so that we will have greater joy in Jesus, dwell in his presence more closely. Norman Tanner reminds us that Lent is ultimately a time of joy, even though we're confessing sin, sacrificing something. That sacrifice isn't the end. It's a means to the end. Because Jesus' death isn't the end of the story either. Jesus rose, and when we participate in his death, we also get to share in the resurrection. If you'd like to be a part of this Lent observance and haven't ever done so, we've got some resources for you, whether you know Jesus or not. Check out the description or the comments for some links and practices you can start today, whether it's the first day of Lent or not. Let this time not just be about spring coming or egg hunting. Why not be reborn into new life yourself? And if you want to know about Holy Week, how it ties to Lent, and why it's important to Jesus followers, just watch the next video in this 3-part series.